with us some insights to her life with Mike, and if you missed it, we have everything archived. Every year the forum is archived and it is on the web, and you can go back and look at those slides and hear what she said about him there. He's just so dear to us that I just want to honor him in every way, and you and your special relationship. Thank you for that. And now we're going to move on to the Susan Niebur Award, and we are so fortunate to have with us today Kurt, as you heard from earlier. Kurt is going to tell us a little bit about Susan and her background, her interest in early careers and promoting young people in the early stages of their career and their work was so important to her. And she was such a dear person to so many of us that, again, we're very happy to be able to honor her in this way. And so Kurt will introduce our award winner and tell you a little bit about Susan today. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. I was very pleased and excited when Greg and Yvonne reached out to me again this year to ask me to come present this award. I think it's very important as a community for us to always realize our roots, the people that have come before us, the influence that they have had on our community as a whole. So the Susan Mann Niebur Early Career Award is an annual award given by this group to early career scientists who have made significant contributions to the science or exploration communities. The recipients of the award are researchers who are 10 years out from their PhD or less, who have shown excellence in their field and demonstrating meaningful contributions to either the science or exploration communities. And I think it's that last word, communities. That's the important word. Susan was never content to stay in the lab, head down, getting results, getting papers out. That was something that she enjoyed, just like I imagine all of you enjoy that. But she always hungered for a little bit more. She always hungered for that sense of community. And when she didn't find it on occasion, she took it upon herself to create that community. Whether it was as an undergraduate, as a graduate student at Washington University, where she did a lot of work, getting the physics department there to really team up and to realize that they could help one another achieve their goals. Or moving beyond that to the graduate school as a whole at Washington University, which she helped organize. And then taking a step beyond that to the national level with the National Association of Graduate Professional Students. Community was always very, very important to Susan. And that's something that she continued when she came to headquarters, and something that she continued when she left headquarters to move on with other career goals. That sense of community I'm glad to see in this room today. And it's because of that drive to create something beyond yourself, to contribute to the betterment of your fellow scientists and researchers, that I'm very pleased to present the award this year. This year's prize will be presented to Dr. Jacob Bleacher, who is a member of Survey's RIS-4E and Dream 2 teams at NASA Goddard in Greenbelt, Maryland. Jake, where are you? Come on up. So let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Bleacher. His current research combines a wide array of interests, including fieldwork, geomorphology, physical volcanology, which is probably one of the scarier sounding interests. Physical volcanology, suggesting that you're actually sticking your head in a volcano. Good luck with that. Planetary geology and remote sensing. He has served as a geologist crew member for the Desert Rats. I imagine everybody here is probably familiar with the Desert Rats, but that's the Desert Research and Technology Studies Group. And he edited a special edition of Acta Astronautica dedicated to the 2010 Desert Rats field season. In addition, he co-proposed a GSA special paper, number 483, on analogs for planetary exploration, which was a really massive compilation of 33 different chapters of different historical accounts of astronaut geology training, which I think is a really important topic because, as Clive mentioned, in the quest to explore the solar system, starting in low Earth orbit, continuing to the moon and beyond. It's very important to make sure that science is not just something that's done as a byproduct of that. And by engaging the exploration community, engaging the astronauts, and making sure they understand the context for the science, that's actually absolutely critical to making exploration and science go hand in hand. He has, so that 33 chapter compilation talked about educational field trips, concepts for future human exploration missions to the moon, among many other topics. Jake also served as the lead volcanology instructor for the 2013 astronaut class and has taken part in numerous astronaut and engineer geology training events. And he will be leading the Survey's CLSE field team's training excursion this fall to the Zuni Bandera volcanic field to help expose planetary science students to field geology. And again, I'm very pleased to present this to Jake because I think he really does exemplify Susan's drive to build communities. Thank you very much.
Sorry, wait a minute. Oh, thank you. I thought you wanted me to turn around. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. I'll hold this for you.
Okay, great. Okay, well, I'm not much of a poet, and I'm glad that Clive went ahead and did the politicking thing, so I'm going to talk about a topic that, following on Kurt's words, I think we're probably very front and center for Susan, and that's mentorship. I feel extremely awkward standing up here while people talk about my accomplishments, considering the fact that all of those accomplishments were me working with teams of very great people. Most personal awards, I think, are really reflective of somebody on a team of great people, and I can say that in my case. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about mentorship. Unfortunately, I never actually had a chance to shake Susan's hand and chat with her. To her credit, as an amazing person, every time I would see her at the conclusion of something, she was surrounded by a cloud of very interested people who wanted to talk to her. But I was heavily influenced by her, indirectly through what she did, as well as my colleagues who were heavily influenced by her. So as I was preparing this talk, I was looking around the internet a little bit and reading up on some of Susan's accomplishments. And I found a quote on a blog article by Emily Lakdawala, who many people know is a very strong supporter of the kind of work that we all do. And what she said was, "I knew her professionally as a staunch supporter of and passionate organizer for young people, women, and families in planetary science." So I underlined these three things. Winning an early career award, I guess, defines me as hopefully still a young person. I think I just squeaked in there on my last year of eligibility for the award. I'm kind of in this transitional phase now. One way to define young, I guess, is by numbers. So this award is for folks 10 years or less out. But I've also gone through this transition that I'm sure many folks have also gone through, where you get out of grad school and you just work like crazy to get yourself supported, to support yourself, and you're very worried about next year and whether or not you're going to be supported. And along the line, you start to support yourself, and then you reach this point where you start to worry about how are you going to support those people who are coming behind you? How are you going to make sure that the good people don't fall off and disappear and go into some other avenue? And I think maybe that is the marker of transitioning from early career to, I'm not going to try to define what the next step is, as I'm exploring that myself right now. But the survival of the young people in the career field is very, very important to me, as I had a lot of help on the way through. The survival of women in our workforce is also very important. Many of my colleagues are women, and I depend on them for everything that I've accomplished. So those teams I talk about, they weren't just guys. There were a lot of women involved there. And to point towards the families part of that discussion, I'm a father. I have a 3-year-old boy and a 6-year-old daughter. My daughter is extremely inquisitive. She is so curious. She questions me daily to the point where I don't know the answer to what's going on. She's a very happy person, very spunky, and she's 6, and I hope she'll be that way when she's 16, and I hope she'll be that way when she's 26 and 36, and I'll get to witness it every year until I'm done here on this earth. So the survival of women is very important to me in the career field. And then, of course, families. As I mentioned, I'm a father of 2. I'm a husband, and protecting those families and your family core unit as you fight in this field to do good science and do good engineering and merge the two. So again, Susan was very inspirational to me. I'll tell you what I learned from watching Susan, and that was also mentioned by Kurt just a few moments ago. I learned that if you see a need in the community, you don't go tell somebody else about it and expect them to fix it. You got to go out there and you got to do it yourself. And that was something she definitely exemplified for us. And so today, with that theme in mind, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the individual mentors that helped me along the way, because I think they exemplify some of those mentorship traits that we should all try to go after. And then what Susan really did was establish that mentorship through groups, okay? It's hard when you're facing a challenge. It's easier when you're facing a challenge and other people are experiencing a similar challenge. And it's also easier when other people experienced that challenge and made it the whole way through. So bringing those kinds of support groups together is really important. And then I'll talk a little bit more about where we are right now in some of these mentorship type groups. So as Kurt mentioned, I'm working with Dave Krang and his survey team to lead a field trip at Zuni Bandera this year, but I have a talk on that later. So I'm not going to focus on that here. I also have other talks on science, so I'm not going to focus on the science, I'll focus on this type of work. So I'm going to focus on Tim Glotch's team, RISE, and a field experience that we realized this year in our field campaign working with a journalism group through Stony Brook. So let's start out with individual mentors. In 1999, I stumbled into an internship at Goddard Space Flight Center, and I'm this kind of scruffy looking guy up here with the green shirt, that's me. Stumbled into Goddard Space Flight Center, and I met someone named Susan Sakamoto. And technically I was working for Jim Garvin, but she was the one who actually worked with me day to day. She was basically in a seat that I sit in now at Goddard, and she was a great person to work with. She really cared about and helped you out as you were learning how to become a scientist. Now, as I worked with her, I ended up writing an LPSC abstract that year. I was still an undergrad, and I submitted it. And as you can imagine, I was quite nervous getting ready for that talk. And I think what Jim Garvin told me, knowing I was quite nervous, he said, "It's okay to be nervous. When I gave my first talk, after I was done, I went out in the alley and threw up. So you'll be fine." Okay, well, okay, thanks. And, so I was glad that Jim had the confidence in me, but I'm not sure that helped me a whole lot in that pep talk. But what Susan said to me was, at this moment, you know more about this topic than anybody else in the world. These are scientists you're talking to, and they're very curious, so go out there and tell them about it. And that settled me. She made me realize that I was the one that did this research, and I was the one looking at that data, and really all I'm doing is telling it to a series of people who are very curious about what I had to do. So the picture here is just Susan and Eric Groffies, and a guy named Carl Mendelson there beside me, who's not a planetary scientist. But this was a 2000 Keck Geology consortium where we had undergrads at Goddard, so I was helping them run that. Another mentor for me is Herb Frye. He's currently my lab chief, but when I stumbled into Susan's office, I also stumbled into his office right next door when I first got to Goddard. And from the beginning, he has always had this open door policy where if the door's open, you are free to come in here and talk to me about whatever. And he was a tremendous mentor, not just professionally, but on all levels. Everything that the quote for Susan said about family, about supporting your friends, anything that you have to ask him about, he's been great. But professionally, he kind of put me on a theme that is something I'm on to this day. He had a quote: "Earth is but one of a family of planets that have each evolved in unique ways, but which have shared many commonalities. And he was instilling in me this concept of comparative planetary geology, comparing the planets. You can learn about Earth by looking at Mars. You can learn about the moon by looking at asteroids. You are never supposed to be stovepiped on just one little thing. Think about how it can compare to other aspects of solar system exploration. Now I'm going to throw a picture up here of a guy that I would guess only a handful of people in this room recognize on sight. Maybe Jim back there. Yep. Probably a few more of you would know him by name. Carly discussed the competing hypotheses for the formation of the moon. And I'll tell you, this guy does not favor the giant impact. And he would chat your ear off about it in a second right now, I guarantee you, if he was here to discuss it with you. But I'll introduce this guy from using the words of Don Wilhelms into A Rocky Moon. This is Don Wise. Don Wise went on leave from peaceful Franklin and Marshall College to enter the maelstrom as chief scientist and deputy director of Shearer's office, the Apollo Lunar Exploration Office. This was in 1967. He served in that role up through the Apollo 11 landing. After that, he left NASA and he went to UMass Amherst, became quite a successful structural geologist, worked with folks like George McGill, mapped extensively in the Rockies and the Appalachia on the East Coast. Followed his career there at UMass, and then he came back to Franklin and Marshall's emeritus. And that was when I stumbled into his office when I was starting college at Franklin and Marshall. I went in, and initially I thought I wanted to be an astronomer. I really liked space. A few classes of astronomy, and I realized, man, you know what? I really like being outside. I like being dirty. I like, playing with the gear and camping and stuff like that. And astronomy's not doing it for me. Stumbled into this guy's office, and he's talking about geology. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And he concluded the class talking about Apollo, and we did a crater counting exercise, and I thought, wow, this is really neat. I could actually do the space part as well as the geology part. And so Don was a great guy. He, or still is a great guy. But he, the following summer, I ended up working at Franklin and Marshall over the summer. I grew up in Lancaster. Don grew up in Lancaster. I guess my technical title was lab technician. Basically, I put the liquid nitrogen in the SEM and things like that, keep the lab going. But Don thought that meant that I was basically slave labor for his field work over the summer. So it was not uncommon for him to grab a hold of me and grab a magnetometer and go down to the rocks below the Holtwood Dam that were freshly exposed and just go to work. And he taught me a lot about mapping. He's a great mentor. And in the end, I was sitting in his office as I was getting ready to leave for grad school. And his quote, which follows right along with what Herb had told me, was, if you choose to enter the world of planetary geology, you better never forget your dirty field boots. And he was serious. I think he was prepared to smack me if I didn't follow those instructions. So I went straight from this guy's office to this guy's office at Arizona State. So many of you, I'm sure, know Ron Greeley. Some of you know him very well. I feel like I know him pretty well. He's the kind of guy who could make you really uncomfortable in his office, especially when the door was closed. He was a very tough mentor, and he taught almost extensively through experience. So we never really had a discussion about, here's what you learned. Either you learned it or you did not, and you kept suffering. And it was tough at times, I won't lie. But I loved when we would get out in the field. That was a great place to learn from him. And funny, I was with Yvonne this morning talking to the lightning round speakers, and I was explaining how this concept of a 1 to 2 minute talk was something Ron would throw on us all the time. He called it the elevator speech, as many of you probably do as well. Except he would just grab you when he passed you in the hallway and say, I'm Jim Green in the elevator, go. Oh, well, I study lava flows and how they flow, and then when they flow, what they do. And he's like, is that really what you think Jim would want to hear from you? And then he'd walk away. It's like, I messed that up, so that was not uncommon. So when you were in the hall, it was like, oh, geez, it's running around the corner, I gotta get to the bathroom quick. So, but again, it was this teaching through experience that he used. And when I left his office, one of his great quotes was, "The arrow between terrestrial analog and planetary studies points both ways." And so it's just driving home this theme. He also taught me that when you go on field trips, You can't take alcohol on school field trips. You do need snakebite medicine, though. Snakebite medicine tends to be made by companies like Budweiser, Coors. It wasn't uncommon for him to require some snakebite medicine, just to be safe, okay, just for clarity. What? Oh, this guy get up here. What? The great part about going after Clive is you get to rib him a little bit, and he can't get to you till the questions, I guess. I can't stand up here and not mention the colleagues along with which I've been awarded today. We'll move into the group mentorship here, but both of them have mentored many people in this room. They both supported a group that we formed, following in the footsteps of Susan, called the Next Generation Lunar Scientists and Engineers. Carly supported that. One of the things we tried to do is to bring groups of the next generation together, and then try to, it's hard when you see a Carly at a meeting and you're really young and it's like, oh, I really want to meet her, but she's talking to some important people. Like, what am I going to do? Go push Clive out of the way? Probably not. So what we said was, well, we're in the field already, so why don't we set up these meetings and we can invite people like Carly, and then you all can come and you can talk to Carly without all the other folks around. So then we had to actually back that up. We thought we could do that, but we had to make sure we could pull it off. So, Carly was more than happy to do that. She helped us out at an AGU one year. Clive, we had to bribe him a little bit. We'd say, Clive, we're going to do this at a pub. Think you can be there? And they've got a array of food and, plenty of iced tea. And he'd say, sure, I'll definitely be there. So he would come and he supported our social gatherings. He was a very strong supporter of us from the very beginning. Mike also supported this. We formed this group the first year of the NLSI. We're sitting in the crowd and we definitely noticed that there was folks coming along who were, this pulse of money had just come into the system, and a lot of new faces were coming in, and we wanted to make sure that they became integrated with the community. And we literally sat down that year over in the other building and wrote our charter. Can't be a group without a charter, right, inside NASA. So we did that on hand. The next year we had a workshop, and Mike was one of the guys we wanted to ask to come. So Mike said, yeah, I definitely want to do this. I really want to be there for your folks, but got this executive meeting going on. So he was like, so you come over and get me, because I'm probably going to forget about it because I'll be talking about all this stuff. I thought, okay. So, here I was, early career guy. I was like, well, this is going to be awkward. So I kind of, snuck in the back of the room, and there's Mike right at the front of the room. I'm like, oh, sheesh, this is going to be hard to extract him out of here. And he looked back and saw me and got right up and came right out. I mean, he was, to his word, was there. And I also wanted to follow along what Clive said. One time Noah Petro and I were at the end of a meeting somewhere, and the great thing about Mike was for guys like Noah and I who were brand new to the community, he would just come up and talk to us, okay? We didn't have to fight our way up to Mike. He would just come over and talk to us. He wanted to know what we thought about things. So we were standing around talking to Mike, and he said, what do you think I did before I did this? I don't know. We had some ideas. They were wrong. So I was a bouncer. Mike, I can believe that. Yep, I can imagine that you were a very good bouncer. And he said to us, but you know what my favorite part about being a bouncer was? It wasn't the fact that I could grab most people and get them out of there or influence the situation physically. It was the ability to recognize the problem well before it happened and use my mind to shut it down. And I thought, man, Mike, that's what a better thing to say as a NASA manager than looking forward, trying to find the problems and prepare for them as you move along. So Mike was just a great guy, as we all know. Another thing I want to point out here is that mentorship is never a one-way path. Okay, there's not a mentor and that's the job. Mentors learn just as much from the people they're mentoring. And I would, is this a laser pointer? Point out right here in the crowd, this guy is Paul Lohman. Many of you probably know Paul. He's credited as the first geologist hired by NASA. Mike gave a talk. You would think it would be all the early career people there to listen. Nope, Paul was there. Paul, who mentored many of the people that now worked for or with Mike or were ahead of Mike. And there was Paul, learning what he could learn from Mike as a mentor. Okay, so this brings us to the last thing I want to talk about. Well, what are we doing now? I talked about the next generation a little bit, and that's been a great group, and we've gotten great support from Survey and NLSI through the years on that. But as we wrote our survey proposal for the RISE team, which is PI'd by Tim Glotch out of Stony Brook, we were preparing our education public outreach effort because we had that in that round. And what we did was we came up with this approach of integrating within RISE our NASA field team, which was going out to do field work every year, the Stony Brook School of Journalism, who hosts a special group called Journalism Without Walls, where they take their journalists out into the field and they go out and they basically learn how to be a journalist, just like we go out in the field and learn how to be a geologist. Also, this Stony Brook Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science kind of bundled these things together in an effort where we then essentially were focused on developing science communication skills for both our scientists as well as our journalists. Develop these communities together as we move forward. So what we did was we basically embedded the journalism students as well as a professor and a TA with us during our field science campaign. So now we're basically training these groups together and how to operate together. So out in the field, we would have groups that were running different instruments, and we had a crew. We were simulating a crew team. And then we had journalism students right there with us. And in fact, in many cases, here's Kelsey Young operating one of our instruments. The journalism students were right there documenting it, recording it, listening to the discussions. They were extremely involved in what was going on. So this was a real great way to show them how science works. Instead of just them and us, and they interview us, it was now them working with us and learning about how science works and us learning how to talk to them. This was also linked with a class on science journalism taught at Stony Brook University the semester before. So this is not just let's take a couple people out in the field. This was a well-planned effort 2 years ahead of time, and they actually had this in their curriculum designed to lead into our field campaign. So that was taught at the school, and as part of that, we actually did facility tours for the students. They've toured many of the facilities associated with RISE, and they've had chances, going back to mentorship, they talked to a lot of the science writers at Goddard, the journalists that worked there for us, so they got a real good flavor of what was going on. And then they got the experience interviews both in the field and back at camp. So basically, I just want to say that this is something that everybody should be thinking about a little bit. We train teachers, we train science students. Journalists are folks we need to bring along for the ride, okay? In a time when politics is yanking our science results in different directions, teaching the journalists along with us how to communicate for us, because sometimes, no matter how much we try to talk to our politicians, they're going to be the ones who write the reports that are read about what we do. And so we need to work with them. And this was a highly successful test, and it involved a lot of training. We finally got back some of our reviews from the students. I'll just read one of them. Never stop doing things like this. Bridging science and journalism to otherwise unrelated fields is so vitally important for young students to witness. This experience has been nothing short of life-changing. So for me, that's kind of a boom goes the dynamite type of moment, right? We did the work for several years to pull this together, and it came together. And they got to do things like live interviews. The astronaut office assigned Rick Mastracchio to our field campaign, so they got to work with higher profile people out in the field. There's some links on here you can check out. They put together a lot of products, and their website's about to go live. So as that comes up, I'll put it together. And we do have a poster on this that you should try to stop by. So thank you very much, and once again, it's quite an honor to be mentioned with the group, Carly and Clive here, as well as an award named after Susan. Thank you.
If we have one question, we have time for that, but otherwise we're going to move on. Okay, I see a question.
Hi, Jen Heldman, NASA. Oh, great talk, Jake. Thank you for talking about this topic and also bringing up the issue of keeping the young workforce in the pipeline. Because I think I share your concern that I see people that are struggling to, pay their rent and buy their ramen, which is what you need to do, postdoc age and whatnot. So I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on maybe what NASA could be doing or should be doing on that front to help keep those people coming up behind us.
Going with the quote I said about when you see a need, addressing it yourself, the best thing that I could say is for groups like myself who are kind of in this mid-career range is to not forget about those coming behind you. The biggest help to us being able to support the groups was getting support from groups like the NLSI and Survey before us. We wrote a ROSES proposal and got it funded to support NextGen for 3 years. You know, you got to think outside the box on some of these things. It's not just write a science proposal that supports a postdoc, but there are other avenues if you think a little bit about it. And we have extensive education and public outreach communities of people that you can work with as well. Because this, again, came out of our EPO plan. And, you know, so think about that. But it's from our position, when you have the podium, you can talk about it a little bit. And it's our job now, I think, to go ahead and try and find that support to keep those students coming along.
Wonderful. Great answer. Thank you so much. Let's thank them again.